Hello everybody, welcome to my August live stream. Again, like last month, I'm squeezing it in at the end because time slips away. This month we're going to talk about wild clay. So if you haven't seen my channel before, this is a great place to learn about primitive pottery, pottery replication, wild clay, outdoor pottery firing, these aspects of primitive pottery. And so today's subject is wild clay, but if you have a question about any of those things, primitive pottery replication, that sort of thing, go ahead and ask them. This is an a Q&A live stream, but we're going to be talking about all sorts of pottery related subjects if you have questions about it. I have prepared a slideshow to share with you with a bunch of pictures of clay in the wild, so that hopefully, if you're not used to finding your own clay out in nature, will give you some ideas, places to look, what to look for, that sort of thing. So we're going to be talking about that as well as answering any questions you have. If you have questions about the process, how to process clay, we'll cover all of that. So I'm going to get started here. I don't have any notes. I usually have some notes on things I want to remind you of. First of all, if you could give me a like, that would help me with the algorithm very much. So I appreciate that. And secondly, the Southwest Kiln Conference is coming up real soon. It's September 27th through the 29th, so just a little over a month away. And it's in Cortez, Colorado. So if you're interested in the Southwest Kiln Conference, it's a great place to learn more about this style of pottery, specifically replication, but any of those, outdoor pottery firing would be really the theme of it, because on Saturday we're going to fire a ton of pottery in a lot of different ways. There's going to be multiple firings going on. So even if you're just learning, it's a great place to observe and learn. But if you're an experienced potter, it's also a great place to participate. Meet other potters, ask questions. I'm going to be there all 3 days, and so will a lot of other really great potters. So think about coming. The website is swkiln.com if you want to learn more about where that is and when it is and what's going to be going on. So that's it. Let me dive into our content. First of all, I'm going to go to the chat, make sure I've answered everyone's questions or get caught up on what's going on. Jerry's here. Hey, Jerry, it's good to see you. The Sunberg family, I was adding sand to my wild clay mix for temper. 30% it seems too sandy without seeing my mix. Can you explain temper and possibility of having too much? Thanks, I'm a newbie. So when you have clay, when you find clay, you don't know how much. So temper, just for those that are new, temper is non-plastic material. So you've got different kinds of clay. These are plastic. That is, when you get them wet, you can mold them, right? So they're plastic. Temper is non-plastic material. It's important to add non-plastic material to your clay. It does two things. It helps the clay dry more evenly because it gives away a pathway for the moisture to come out. So it opens up the clay body, makes it less dense so the moisture can escape so it can dry evenly. And the second one has to do with thermal shock. If the pottery in the firing gets too hot, too fast, or cools too fast, it will crack. And that temper can protect against that. So all wild clay is going to need some temper added to it to make it usable in pottery. But a lot of clay, when you dig it out of the ground, it naturally has non-plastic material in it. It depends on how it was sorted in nature, whether it was on a lake bed or a seabed. Some of those are really, really pure. Others that were like laid down by rivers, they've got a lot of grit in them, silt, sand, other things. They could have volcanic ash in them, different things that act as non-plastics, as tempers. And so when you first grab one, you don't know, right? You can feel it in your hand and kind of guess, but you've got to basically make a little test pot out of it. So what I usually do, and I did a video within the last year, where I actually went out and I collected these clays, and then later I did another video where I tested them all. And that's a good video to watch, where I'm going through the procedure of showing you how I run this test. So each of these, I think I had 5 clay samples, might have been 6. Each one, I ground up a small amount. I added 20% temper, just as kind of a standard baseline. And that doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. I mean, every clay needs a different amount of temper. Some needs more, some needs less. So 20% is a good starting place. I added 20%. I made a little test pot and I fired it. And then I could get a feel for it. And right away I'll know. Like as soon as I start making that test pot, I'll say, oh, this feels a little gritty. You know, this is grittier than I wanted. Or maybe it's lacking plasticity. Those things will tell you that you need to, take temper out maybe if it doesn't. Because adding temper removes plasticity. So if the clay isn't really workable, that tells you you've got too much temper. If the clay cracks when it dries, that tells you you don't have enough. And a lot of clays are not usable. You can add temper, take it out, and you still find that you need to find a different clay. So I know that's a long way around the horn for somebody that's starting out, but temper is important, but you don't know how much to add at first. So you're going to have to experiment, the point I'm making, before you know how much temper to add. Ren Pixie, who is always here on my live streams, by the way, asked me about snakes. Have I ever had a close encounter with snakes? Yeah, I've run into snakes when I'm out looking for or collecting clay, but I don't have any really good stories to tell you about the one time I almost got bit by a snake or something like that. But, I mean, I live in Arizona. There are rattlesnakes. Collecting clay, usually when I'm out looking for clay, I'm in more open places where there's like a bank of dirt, a stream bank, a road cut. These are the kind of places where if there is a snake, you can see it, before you step on it. The ones that really scare me is when I'm collecting firewood for, like building a fire, for firing pottery. Because then you're reaching down into the brush. You're reaching down in the ground and picking stuff up. And that's when you'll really get it. Because you're wandering around in the brush. They'll be hiding up under a bush. You'll reach your hand in, and they'll get you on the hand. And that's where you don't want to get bit. If you're going to get bit, I mean, nobody wants to get bit. But if you're going to get bit, you want to get bit on like the side of your leg or someplace where there's a lot of flesh so that when it swells, it has some place to go. I was snake bit when I was 14 on the side of my calf. And it swelled up, but because it was the side of my leg, it had a lot of places to go, and the swelling it swelled up and it got sore, but it wasn't life-threatening and didn't do real damage. But like on a finger, there's only so much flesh there. And so the swelling will it'll get that finger so big that you're damaging the flesh, and you're possibly like going to crack open and stuff. So where it does the most damage is on extremities, hands, feet, those kind of things. In your face, boy, you don't want to get bit on your face. And so when you're reaching into, what really scares me is reaching in, getting firewood and stuff. Be really careful when you're out there. If you're reaching down in the brush to grab branches and stuff, be really careful. I think collecting clay is probably one of the less dangerous snake-wise activities. Where are we at here? I'm trying to go through the chat and it's kind of jumping around, so be patient with me. Adrian says, there's a source of clay I like to use, but it cracks a lot more often when firing than any of the other clay I use. Is it a type of mineral in the clay, or is it something else? It's just I don't know if it's the type of mineral as much as maybe it could have to do with the clay particle size or stuff. I'm not really an expert on knowing what causes the different things, right? Some clays are just no good. They have too high a shrinkage rate. That could cause that cracking you're talking about. They're lacking in plasticity. That could cause that cracking you're talking about. If I had a clay that was cracking a lot, I think I would try to, is it crack? The question is, I guess, when it's cracking. Is it cracking when it dries? Or is it cracking when it's when you're forming it? You're trying to make a pot and it's basically cracking. If you're forming it and it's cracking while you're forming it, that's lack of plasticity. That means you need to clean those non-plastics out. You need to like levigate that clay, make it purer so that it's more plastic. If it's cracking when it's drying, that implies you need to add more temper. So those mean different things depending on when it's cracking. Do All Things with Love says, how exciting to catch a live stream. Glad you made it. Do All Things with Love. Ghosty Ocean is here. Good to see you. I just went and harvested wild clay from a local creek this morning. Right on. Good way to spend your Sunday morning. Sarah Jardin, hi. I don't know what that means. Hi, a DY. Does the Southwest Kiln Conference happen every year at about the same time? Yeah, no, it happens every year, and every year it's in a different place. So it's usually in the fall, because that's when we have our best weather for this in the Southwest. We have our monsoons from like July through September, and so it's pretty wet in that time. And before that, we have our fire season when it's real dry. We don't want to build a lot of fires in, say, May, June, early July here because of fire danger. And so in the Southwest, that leaves us with the fall as a good place to have that. So although it's not set on a specific weekend or a specific time, it does tend to be in the fall because of the weather. But yeah, it changes year to year. We're not really sure yet where we're going to have it in 2025. I'm organizing the 2025 conference, and I haven't found a spot that's willing to host us yet, but I'm working on it. Ghosty Ocean, the crackled texture and stickiness when slightly damp were dead giveaways. Oh yeah, for sure. And some of the pictures I'm going to show you today will show that. JW, hello, I find my clay is very sticky when wet, but the moment it starts to dry is a workable texture. It breaks apart extremely easily. Oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like you have a good clay there. Overly sticky when wet and then breaks apart when it's at a good working texture. I think probably you need to find some better clay, JW. Unfortunately, it had some white streaks of shells in it, which seemed to be calcium. Yeah, you're going to try to clean that calcium out if you can. And then the other thing you can do, Ghosty Ocean, is keep your firing temperature down. As long as you fire below like 800 C, which is fine for making earthenware, then you won't have that problem with calcium pops, calcium oxide. The Sunberg family, thank you, Andy. I'll look for that video. Appreciate it. JW, I've tried a 0, 10, 20 and had the same results. I'm not sure if I might just need to look elsewhere. Yeah, I think that's the answer. It sounds like really terrible clay. And there's a lot of terrible clay out there. What I tell people is, with the odds being what they are, chances are the first clay you find is not going to be a great clay. You're going to have to go through 10, 12 clays, 20 clays before you find that really great one. So just, sometimes you find a great one the first time. I'm just saying the odds are you're not going to find it the first time. 80 in the Crafter, the porcupine keeps eating the plants in our garden and somehow stole 3 pots and buried it underground. Porcupines are weird animals. Goes the ocean. Try 30%. If it still doesn't work, you may need to find a new source. Yeah. JW, thank you. Everything seemed like it was going deceivingly well until it actually dried. Lanite Dave is here. I worry more about scorpions than snakes. Yeah, for sure. If you're picking up rocks and stuff, a lot of times there'll be scorpions under them. And I can't say I've had a lot of close encounters with scorpions, but they're one of those things here in the Sonoran Desert. A lot of our scorpions are pretty small, and I have a feeling I probably interact with them and don't notice it. Well, I have the same feeling about snakes. Like sometimes I'll go years without seeing a snake, and that makes me nervous because I'm like, I've probably walked over a few snakes and I'm just not seeing them, and I should, I'm not being careful enough if I'm not seeing them. And it's the same way with scorpions. Like if I don't see them very often, I think probably they're seeing me more often than I'm seeing them. But I guess be careful when you pick up something that's on the ground because it could have a scorpion under it. But I don't walk around barefoot, so I'm likely to step on one. If you ever go out to the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum here in Tucson, they have a really nice program in the summer where they're open at night because it's really hot during the day. So you can go during the night and the animals are more active and it's a great experience. And some of the docents and people that work there are going around with black lights, and they'll shine that black light on the ground or on like stone walls and stuff, and you can see the little scorpions will, they'll kind of glow in the black light. And you become aware of just how many scorpions are around. It's a little bit surprising. Who dis says, how has the Oya been working? Oh, in my garden. Yeah, working great. I keep it filled, and the plants used to be, especially that big pepper plant. I have a jalapeno there. It would get wilty if I didn't water it every day, and now it can go 3 or 4 days without watering, and it doesn't get wilty because it's drawing water out of that Oya, which holds water for. It'll take even on a hot day when the days are real hot. It'll take 3 or 4 days to completely empty that Oya. So I think it's working pretty good. How long to dry out vessels in plastic bags? Oh, well, if you wrap them good in a plastic bag, they'll keep indefinitely. There's not a time. They'll stay moist as long as you keep them sealed up real good. Ren Pixie, Southwest Kiln Conference in Springerville anytime soon. Okay. We had the Southwest Kiln Conference in Springerville in 2016, and it was really good. It was at the rodeo grounds, and that's certainly a possibility. I've been talking, since you live up in that area, I've been talking to the people at the college in Show Low, and I had some good response just last week with one of the professors there who's going to talk around to other teachers at the college and see what kind of resources they have for us. So definitely, Ren Pixie, I'm definitely trying to host it in your area next year. I haven't looked at Springerville, but it's not off the realm of possibilities. And besides the rodeo ground, I think that that Calsa Malpai might be interested in hosting an event like this, which is a museum that's run by the city of Springerville. And talking about pottery and plastic, I'll show you my pot. This is the pot I'm working on for the Ancient Potters Club this month. So our project this month is Tonto Polychrome jar. And so I made myself a nice big one. I just finished, I worked on this a lot yesterday. So when you do these, you have to slip the white. This is that smectite clay white, and it's real thin. So you have to put the white on first, and just in the white areas. So I don't like paint the whole thing white and then paint the red in. I basically paint the white slip where I want it. Then I come around and I paint the red where I want it. So I go around that design twice. And then I have to take, and if you'll notice, the red is shiny. I actually have to polish the red in because it's a hematite wash. It won't stick on the clay otherwise. So then I come around with the stone, but I have to make sure I don't smudge it into the white because I'll make a mess of it. And so basically you have to trace the design with the polishing stone as you do it. And then at this point, there might be a few places. Why is that spotlight kind of funny right there? I don't know. It's weird. You can see it in the light really good right there. There's a weird spot. Anyways, I have to let it dry, and then I'm going to put organic paint on this next Wednesday in class. So the organic paint goes only on the smectite white to make, that'll make black designs. So that's where I'm at with that. So yeah, keeping it wrapped in plastic. So I've got it's basically a trash bag. And like I said, I'm drying it out because I need it to be fully dry by Wednesday. But because I was doing the live stream today, I wrapped it up because I wasn't going to be able to kind of babysit it because I want to make sure it dries evenly. So it's just wrapped up for now. Remember to like the live stream. Yeah. So who said that? Adrian the Crafter. So give me a like. That will help me with the algorithm. I appreciate that. And I'm going to get through these questions someday here. Let's see what we got. Raptor Jesus. Oh, also I've been meaning to ask, do you know anything about using quartz temper for pottery? The natives in North Carolina used a lot of it. I've been finding a lot of sherds with white shiny spots. Yeah, so a lot of the natives here in the Southwest also used quartz sand temper. So it works great. One of the other things I like to use for temper sometimes is granite sand. So go to a place where the geology is granite, collect some sand, run it through a screen or something so it's all fairly fine, and that makes a great temper. And granite is, a lot of the ingredients in granite is quartz. So you get a lot of quartz in it when you do that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Rosedale 9 says, hi Andy, my friend and I are looking forward to the Kiln conference. We're traveling from Ontario, Canada, and we'll be bringing our pots from our local clay deposits. Hope to see you there. Wow, that's really cool that you're coming so far. You might be the farthest traveling person at the conference this year. James Cecil, just formed a pookie out of the first gray clay I found in Oklahoma. That's awesome. Oklahoma has a lot of good clay. I know because I used to live there. Adrian the Crafter, I was on a clay hunt a while back. I gathered 4 sources, and 2 out of the 4 clay sources work quite well and fire quite hard. Hey, that's good. You must live in a good area. Ren Pixie says she's killed 3 Mojaves. That's a type of rattlesnake, by the way, so far on our property up here. Wow, that's crazy. That'd make me a little nervous to even walk around. One time I did a little tap dance over a copper, what do they call them? Copperhead. So when I lived in Oklahoma, they had rattlesnakes there too, but I had a lot of copperheads, and I went out to feed the chickens barefoot, and there was a piece of plywood that had blown onto the ground, and I picked up that piece of plywood it's on the ground. I grab the side closest to me, and I'm pushing it up as I walk forward to lean it against the wall. And there was a small, small was, 8, 10, 12 inches, copperhead under that plywood. And here I'm barefoot, and I noticed him, and I've got the plywood in my hand, and my feet are doing this, trying to not step on the copperhead. It was crazy. My kids were there. They saw the whole thing, and they, they thought, we all laughed about it later, but pretty scary stuff. If you've got those kind of things on your property, you've got to be super careful. Shelly Kelly, I need to rewatch your video about alternative kilns. We live in an HOA, and if I want to make pottery at home, we need to be creative. Yeah, for sure. Some of those primitive kilns are good, even in a neighborhood, because if people even smell the smoke or something, if they smell charcoal, they think you're barbecuing. So if it looks like a barbecue, then they think you're barbecuing. I have a friend a student in Australia who made one of those tandoors. There's a video that I made about a guy that fires pottery in a tandoor. He made it to make naan bread, but he found it was better for firing his pottery in. Anyways, and that's what she fires her pottery in, because that way the neighbors won't have a problem, because it's just a tandoor, right? The other thing you can do if you live in an area where there's public land is go out to the public land to fire. That's the way I do it. So I do fire some, in my yard, but usually I just drive out 45 minutes or so out of town to places where people camp, and I just fire out there. And that works pretty good. Desert Drifter, maybe it's just me, but I find the clays with high building strength tend to blow up in a firing no matter how much temper I use. Oh, okay, so if they're, so that's a true thing. So a stronger clay sometimes is a very dense clay, and a dense clay has trouble getting rid of moisture, not just the moisture we add, but molecular moisture as well. In the firing, they can blow up. So what you need to do is just keep upping that amount of temper. You can go as high as like 50% temper on some of those very dense clays, and they're still quite usable. So fiddle around with that. You might find some good clay. It just needs a lot of temper. I've been down that road, Desert Drifter. That pot looks amazing. Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate that. Granny Goose is here. Hey, glad to catch you live. Good, glad to see you here. Adrian the Crafter, I'm going to have to do pottery for a while before I get to that level. We got to start somewhere, Adrian. Dave says, I put the black on my jar first and then realized I was a mistake when I started the white. So then you have to outline all the black. Yeah, with the white. Yeah, that's tough. Clarice says, have you tried a wax resist over the white to help prevent mixing the two colors? No. Over the white. Yeah, I suppose you could, but then I still have paint to go on that white. So if there's wax, I'm going to have trouble getting that, the paint to stick as well. So possible. Certainly though, with a replica where I'm trying to do it authentically, the ancient people in this area did not have wax because there were no honeybees here before Europeans arrived. Adrian says, is there any other type of clay that functions like smectite? Well, smectite is a broad category of clay, so that includes bentonites, montmorillonites, there's different types, fuller's earth. There's various types of smectite, of clays that fall into smectite. And so those would be the types I would look at. I think those are the ones you want if you're going to try organic paint. Like I said, it's a fairly broad category. And a lot of those you can buy online, things like fuller's earth and bentonite you can buy on Amazon. So if you don't have any local, you can certainly, I sell it on my website as well, but even people that can't order from my website because they live in Europe or something can get access to that kind of material. Angela is here. Tony Soares has a video where he demonstrates proper way to lift plywood. Lots of critters on his property. Yeah, he lives right in the desert for sure. What about covering a pot in charcoal slip to make it black? The charcoal will burn out in the firing, and then you'll be left with brown or whatever. So a lot of the clays, wild clays, come in all different colors, and some wild clays are black. And then you're surprised. You're like, oh, I found this black clay. This is going to be great. You make a pot, but in the firing, all that organic material that made it black burns out, and you're left with brown or red. You don't know. It could be white. There are black clays that fire white, so you just never know. Charcoal slip would not probably help you in any way. Okay, I'm going to get into my slideshow because I'm burning daylight here. And then I'll get back to the comments and the questions in a minute. All right. Where's it at? Okay. This is my favorite white clay slip. This is the stuff I use on a lot of my pottery. If it doesn't need organic paint, this is a good white that I get up in the White Mountains. And you can see that that layer of white clay is only like 3 inches thick. So it's a very small band of white in among other colors. And so you just have to kind of carefully pick it out. But if there's a color you want, you know, you can be careful. And because it's just a slip, I don't need a 5-gallon bucket of it. You know, a quart-size Ziploc bag is enough to last me for years. So that's one of those clays that, you know, it's worth spending the time picking out little bits. And you can see the sedimentary layers, the way it's, you know, those horizontal layers. And we'll be talking about that as I go through here, looking at other, and this is another one of those spots. That's Bobby Silas up there collecting some clay on the side of a hill, and that just picking out, you know, a little narrow band of clay there. And this is one on the roadside. This is just on the side of the road. And if you keep your eyes peeled as you drive around, you'll see these spots. I mean, why are there no plants growing there? You know, it's because clay has trouble. I mean, plants have trouble getting started in clay because it's so dense, you know. And so when you see badlands means areas where there's no plants, right? You just all earth like that. That's a good indicator that there's clay. The other thing you can look for, if you live in an area where there's more rainfall than where I live, you know, we don't get badlands. But you can see a change in the vegetation a lot of times. There'll be a different kind of plant that likes that clayey soil that grows there, and where the soil is less clayey, other plants. And you get to learn what plants like that clay soil. That can be an indicator of where to dig. And so, yeah, those badlands are a good sign. I mean, not everybody lives in a dry area where that forms that. But that's just driving down the highway and you see it, you pull over, you know, dig it, see what you got. Now, this is an area over in New Mexico where I was digging yellow clay last year. And you can see all those colors in there. And big chunks of sandstone. And sandstone isn't clay. But sandstone is also sedimentary. So when you see sandstone, that tells you it was laid down, you know, in layers just like clay is. And a lot of times in between layers of sandstone, there'll be clay. And in here, you've got gray. You can see it there, some of that gray clay. And then you can see where I was digging down towards the bottom, that yellow pile, where I was digging that yellow clay out. This is the spot that Sherilyn showed me at the Kiln conference last year. This is down by Blanding, Utah, just on the side of the highway. And if you look up above, I mean, it just looks like regular dirt. There would be no indication that there was clay there. But there was an old road, like a little 2-track road. And in the bottom of the 2-track, you could see that kind of, those little angular, kind of flaky chunks that clay makes. And this wasn't dug in the road, because I didn't want to dig a hole, but it was kind of up on the side. And so I just kind of went into the bank next to the road and found real pure clay in there. And believe it or not, this is a good example of what I was telling you about organic matter. Sometimes your clay has organic matter or other things in it that make it a different color. So this clay was quite gray, as you can see, but it fires white. So it fires a good white, believe it or not. So what happens in the firing is all that organic matter burns away and leaves you with the true color of the clay. This is a good up-close picture of a chunk of clay. It has, you know, clay has almost like a soapy texture to it, almost waxy. And you can, even though it's like a rock in this picture where I have it, it's a stone. It's really solid because it's been down in the earth, been compressed by, you know, millions of years of pressure. And it's very, very dense, like a rock. But when you rub your finger on it, you can feel that kind of waxiness, that soapiness about it. And that's a good clue that you found clay. The other thing you can do is you can get it wet. You could spit on it, or you could put a little bit of your, like if you've got a canteen, some water with you, just put a little water on it, just rub it with your finger, and it'll get slick, kind of slippery and soapy right away. And even though it looks like a rock. So that's a good clue. This particular clay I get has these little black or gray dots in it. You can see them here in the picture. These little specks all through it. I always wonder if those are some kind of a fossil, you know, maybe a little plant or something that lived in the swamp where this was laid down. But I don't know. I don't have a microscope. It'd be neat to look at with a microscope. And the next one is actually a video. So I will play this video for you. A lot of times when I'm out collecting clay, I'll record videos in a vertical format because that way I can post them on Instagram or Facebook. And so I have a few of those vertical videos in here that are just raw video footage from out in the field that I'll share with you today. So this, if I can find it, where'd it go? Right here. And this is out south of Tucson in the hills. And you can see, looking at the terrain around there, it's just grass, you know, it's just vegetation. Look at it. There's no clue that there's clay there necessarily. But where the dirt road cuts through it, you can see that crackled mud puddle texture. You can see that it's holding on to those car tracks really good. They've dried up and they're just solid chunks. And so that's a great, you know, a great way to know where clay is. Just drive some dirt roads and look for, you know, that texture in the clay. In the soil. That's a good, you know, clue for what you have there. And there, you see, you've got plants, you got trees, and then, boy, look at that. And it's all dry here. You know, but the same goes for if it was wet. You know, if it was wet, you could see that slickness, that slick muddiness to it. And you could go down there and pick up a little with your hand and feel it. It would feel clayey. Now, I never bothered trying any of this because I had other things going on. I wasn't really interested in a red-brown clay, but certainly if I was looking for clay that day, that would have been a great example to take home and do some testing on. And this is some of that roadside clay too. This is some that we got in Montana. But this is different. This is very different from that last batch we were looking at where it's kind of a dirt kind of clay. This is really hard, you know, like stone-like clay. And you can see those angular chunks it breaks into. You can see that patina. It's got kind of a yellowish patina on it and a black patina in other places. A lot of times clay that's been in the ground, compressed, breaks into those angular chunks and often has that patina on it where minerals are actually leaching out onto the surface over the course of, you know, millennia or something. So this is where I got that clay. This is near Miles City, Montana. And just a little bluff on the side of the road here. And look at, when you dig in, I just chopped it a little with my rock hammer. There's those angular chunks right there. And so we got a whole bucket of that. And my friend who lives in Montana actually has used it and says it's pretty good. Again, I didn't take any that day. I wasn't interested in clay. Now, there's some of those badlands I was talking about. This is down near Benson, Arizona. You've got, you know, you've got just dirty, kind of scraggly looking dirt, desert dirt ground. You got some, you know, little shrubs and stuff growing around. But where you've got that slice in the hill, you can see those layers. You know, those layers that were laid down, that sedimentary deposit. That's a good clue that you're in the right place because clay is laid down in those same kind of layers. Even though not all of these are clay, some of them are kind of dirt, some of them might be sand, you know, but if you've got stuff laid down, you know, in a sedimentary deposit, that's a great place to start looking. And so you can come in and, you know, run some samples on some of these. And there is clay in here. In fact, that white layer is a pretty decent smooth clay. So that's the example of what you're looking for when you're out there. And here's another one of those sedimentary deposits, and this one's down by San Manuel, Arizona. And again, just driving down this country road, and you can see all those horizontal layers. And when you get in there, you know, you start looking, get down and get with your rock hammer into that, and you'll start seeing, you know, which ones are clay and which ones aren't. Let me go back to the chat real quick and catch up on the questions there, and then I'll come back and finish the clay examples if I can find out where I left off here. There's a lot of questions today, so bear with me. Adrian the Crafter says, how long do you preheat your pots for before firing? It doesn't have to be long. It can be 20 minutes, half an hour. You know, you can do it in an oven. You can do it on the side of the, you know, fireside. The video that comes out next week has a pot that exploded, and I thought it was from lack of preheating. Going back and rewatching the video, I'm not sure. I think one of those rocks that I used in the firing exploded and blew up the pottery. And so what I usually do, and what I didn't do good this time, was you got to preheat your rocks as well as your pots, especially at this time of year. Well, here, this is our monsoon season. Other places are different. But if you've had rain and those rocks have been laying on the ground, they can draw up moisture. And you need to make sure you get all the moisture out of those rocks as well. Goes to the ocean. Agent Crafter, I like to preheat mine. Okay. James Cecil left a closed temper site for you on Discord. Okay. Nikon, does the purity of the clay affect the final results? Yeah. So however purified the clay is, that affects how fine you can make the pot too. So yeah, you want a decent clay. You don't want it 100% pure clay though. That's why we add temper. There's something you're looking for there, some amount of temper, 20-30%, that's going to make it good for making a pot out of. But yeah, the quality of your clay has everything to do with the quality of your pottery. Hi all from Wyoming. Andy, I admire all your pottery and love your teaching us to build pots and find awesome clay. Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it. Adrian the Crafter says, does different clay colors have different names? Well, I just call them what I see them, right? Gray, green, yellow, brown. And other people a lot of that's subjective, may call something I call brown, they might call it orange, or they might call it red, right? I don't think there's an official, colors for them. Just crushed about 20 grams of hematite and it melted in my charcoal kiln, making some cool patterns. That's weird. And spots on the pots. Yeah, that's weird. I've never had hematite melt. In my charcoal kiln. In doghouse, clay will stick to the bottom of your tongue. Nothing else will do that. Okay, well, that's good to know. I don't know if I'm going to go around sticking it in my mouth, but Ren Pixie, a live stream has been interrupted by 7 commercials so far. Is YouTube signing you out? Oh, okay, Ren Pixie, I am. First of all, let me apologize. Second of all, I'm struggling with this. The commercials on live streams. So, I don't know how best to do this, right? I tried taking the commercials out of the live streams. But that impacts my ability to do this, because that's how I make my money. But at the same time, I don't want them filling it with 7 commercials. That's ridiculous. So I asked a question on a Facebook group about, how do you, ask other YouTubers, how do you do it? And they said, just put it on the more conservative. So there's different levels, right? You can make it really heavy. You can do it moderate. Conservative is supposed to be real light with commercials. That way you're still making some money, but it's not annoying to your people. But I put it on conservative, and you're still getting 7 commercials in like a half an hour. That's ridiculous. So I don't know. I'm still going to be looking for an answer, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, because the commercials is how I make my money. So, but they shouldn't be doing that much, especially if I click the button that says they're not going to do a lot of commercials. If that's conservative, I don't know what heavy commercials would be. That's insane. Adrian the Crafter, mine has not been interrupted by commercials. That's strange. That is strange. Peanut butter sticks to the roof of my mouth, and that's how I can tell the difference between the two. All right, is that black clay in the last road cut picture? Yeah, I'm going to go back to that in a second. Yes. Does it matter if the clay comes from an area with heavy use? Will there be organic matter and the dirt? Okay, I'm having trouble with this one. Does it matter if the clay comes from an area with heavy use? Will there be organic matter and dirt through the clay? Does the water process over these contaminants? No, it doesn't matter if the clay comes from an area with heavy use or not. Just get the clay and, you could have, some contaminants if it's on the side of a road, for example, sand in it or something, but it's not a big deal. You can purify most of that stuff out either by running it through a sieve or through levigation. I'm not set up to show you about levigating on this video, but I do have videos about levigation. So that's just purifying it through gravity, putting it in a bucket, stirring it up, letting the heavier particles settle to the bottom, pouring off that pure clay, stirring it up, letting those heavier particles settle, that is waiting a couple minutes, pouring off that pure clay to separate the particles from the clay. Fred, hi Andy, Fred here from Brazil. I make good clay from my backyard. using your videos. Thanks. Do you use slip casting with plaster molds? Yeah, I know some people do. I have no experience with slip casting with wild clay, but I know some people do. On Facebook, there's a group called Wild Clay Pottery, and there's people there that do all kinds of things with wild clay. There's people that do slip casting or wheel throwing and stuff. My focus is like hand building, so it's probably a little different, but I know people do that. So that might be a good place, that Facebook group, to ask about slip casting with wild clay, because I know there are people that do it. So good living in the country where you don't get ads on YouTube. Well, that's interesting. Maybe it has to do with the country you live in? I don't know. Lena Marie, haven't seen any commercials, but I do pay for premium. Well, there you go. If you pay for premium, you don't get commercials. Ghosty Oceans, organic matter shouldn't be a problem if the clay is ground fine. What process should remove most contaminants? Yeah, any organic matter in the clay, if it's not too much, is going to either do one of two things, right? Things like roots and sticks. You can sieve most of that out, and anything that makes it through can just be organic timber. But the really, when I see black clay, there's no visible chunks. This organic matter is broken down to its finest particles. It's just in the clay, and in that case, you can't clean it out. You're going to burn it out in the firing. Okay, let's go back to the slideshow real quick. Give me a like if you think about it. And so this is not a road cut. This is a stream bank. So this is up at Q Ranch. This is like Labor Day weekend. So right after the monsoon, they'd had a lot of monsoon rains, and it made some new cuts on the stream. So you got a nice fresh break there. You see all those roots coming down from above. The surface is just not very far above the top of this picture. And that black material, you can see those kind of angular chunks, that kind of crackled texture in there. That is all clay. Not just the black, but that brown layer that's below it also is high clay. I was really excited to see this. So the ancient people that lived at Q Ranch, they made some beautiful pottery. And I have tested clay around the Q Ranch, especially along that creek there, looking for a good clay for building pottery with. And it's all terrible. All of it that I've tried had a really high expansion rate, shrinkage rate, which meant that most things cracked in the drying stage. So this new clay that I was excited about, that black would be like a swampy layer, right? There was like a marsh there at the time, and so there's a lot of organic matter in it. But sometimes that kind of organic matter makes the clay more plastic. It adds that kind of organic, gooey texture to it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, it can help, like I said, make it more plastic. And then in the firing, it burns out and leaves you with brown clay or something. So I was excited to try this new clay, and it turned out exactly like all the other clays I've had at Q Ranch. Super high shrinkage rate and is no good. But that's exactly what you're looking for right there. You can see the material above that last black layer. That's all dirt. It's all full of grit. That's not clay at all. But those two layers with the black, super clay, you can tell by the texture. And that's what I'm trying to show you here. So you can learn what to look for, the texture of wild clay, so that when you're out, you know what to look for as well. And here you go again. This is the bottom of the mud puddle, kind of crackled texture you're looking for. And it's holding on to tracks. There's raccoon tracks there. That's telling you that there's a high clay content. And some of these, you can just pick up those chunks of clay right off the dry lake bed or whatever it is, and just take them home and process them. Some of those are naturally sorted real well, and they're good clays. Here's a couple of my students in one of my workshops, and this is basically the bed of the Gila River. So the water's been taken out of the Gila because they use it for agriculture and stuff. It's mostly dry. There was just a little trickle there. And this was mud that had been laid down by the Gila earlier in the year. And they're just grabbing those chunks, sticking them in Ziploc bags and taking them home, because that's all good clay. And this is one of those spots, a little more dirt looking, but it has the right texture. You can see the texture when you're there. The picture doesn't show it so much, but a little bit crackly, those little angular bits. And this is a decent clay. This is near Tucson. And there's that, that road holding onto those tracks. It had rained, the road had got wet, cars had driven over it, then it dried, and the road was just tenaciously holding onto those car tracks. And the reason is There's a lot of clay in that soil. That's why those tracks are there. If that was more dirt, those tracks would have broken down more easily. Also, you have that crackled texture. That shows you that there's clay there as well. And so I went a few feet over. This is maybe 20 feet away from that road, and you've got that nice red on that in that little washout area, and you can collect it right off of that bank. You're not damaging any natural areas. You're not digging potholes in the road, and so that's that same clay that the road's built on right there. And this is some red material I found near Tucson when I was out hiking. And again, just had that, why is there no plants growing there, right? I mean, it could be that, there was a toxic waste spill, right? But it's not. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There's no plants growing there because that clay is very dense and seeds have trouble getting started there. You get that bad land sort of thing. And so I dug it up. You got those little angular chunks. I took it home, processed it, and that's a good red clay. This is out the Southwest Kiln Conference a couple years ago. We were out collecting wood. So we get there usually like a day early, show up on Thursday and help collect the firewood that we'll use on Saturday in the firings. We were coming back from collecting wood and there was clay on the side of the road. Just, you could see it in the road cut. So that's Wes from Airstream Wandering. Some of you might be familiar with his YouTube channel. And that's Bobby Silas there with him, and they're digging some clay off the side of the road. And that's the texture you're looking for right there. Here you've got those same little angular chunks. You've got that patina. This is up in the White Mountains, by the way, in central Arizona, Wren Pixies area. That's, got a little bit of yellow in it. Probably fires red or brown. Here's one for you. This is that same area. Hey, I wanted to show you this place. So I'm out here near the Bailey Ruin, which was a prehistoric known pottery producing site. And I'm on national forest land, and this area is so rich in clay that it's really amazing. So if you look along this road cut coming up the hill, there are just layers and layers of different colors of clay. You could spend all day out here just looking at different clays and sampling them and bringing them back to the studio and seeing what they make. I'll show you some of the clays that are out here. So this first one I'm going to show you, this is a real white right in here. You see that? Really white. Now there's some red above it, so you'd need to be real careful in just choosing the whitest bits, see? But I'm sure you could get a really good white slip out of that. So that's the first one. I'm not going to take any of that because I have a good white slip right now, but this stuff would be worth sampling if you were interested in that. And there's a lot of grays in here too. So just below, maybe a couple feet below that white, there are these big chunks of what appear to be a gray clay-ish material. It's got a lot of clay in it, but it's got a lot of grit in it too, you can tell. So this stuff probably would need some levication to purify, which, in a lot of cases is worthwhile. In this case, where clay is very abundant, probably not the stuff you're looking for, but still very interesting. I'm sure this would slake down. It seems like the right material. So then down here, I've got some more gray. That's a little purer. Now I'm probably another 4 feet below the other spot. And you can see it's maybe got a little bit of a tinge of a pinkish or almost a lavender color to it. And this stuff also feels like it's got a little bit of grit in it. A little bit of grit isn't bad. You might find something that's self-tempered that doesn't have to have temper added. I don't know. But to me, again, it feels almost a little too gritty. But once again, purer than the last stuff. And maybe a little lighter in color, a little less of that pinkish color to it. I'm going to keep moving down the hill. Got more clays to show you. There's quite a bit of, pinks and lavenders in there if you look. Now down in here is where I think there's really some interesting stuff. So let me get my rock hammer. You can see that right behind me here, there's some yellow material. And if you dig in there with your rock hammer, you see that bright, almost orangey yellow color in there? See that? That is the stuff. That's the stuff you want to use for White Mountain redware to make that bright red slip. That's made out of that yellow clay. And there it is right there. And once again, just like the white that I showed you up the way, if you were harvesting this, you'd have to be careful and just pick out the bits, the purer yellow bits, and not get the brownish bits or the whitish bit, you know. So you can be careful, and because it's just for a slip, you don't need a lot of it, so you can afford to be a little bit choosy. But then next to that, there's some chunks of this really pure, kind of a little bit of a creamy white color. And this stuff has that soapy texture to it. So that's pure clay. These seem really good. I'm going to get some of these and bring them back. And there's quite a few chunks in here. This stuff has kind of come down the hill, so it's all kind of like mixed together. If you could find the pure veins back in there, there's probably a whole layer of the clay and then a layer of this yellow too. But there's enough of it here that you could get what you needed easily right out of this jumbled stuff on the side of the road. Now, working farther down the hill, you can see again, there's more places where I've dug. I found more of that yellow in here. I've got some more gray material in here, some kind of purplish material. And down here, we've got some more pinks, and they just keep going all the way down the road. So, pretty neat area, lots of neat clay to explore. You guys ought to come out and try doing this sometime. It's a lot of fun. Okay. Hope you enjoyed that. That was a little longer one. And this is my last picture, and then I'll get back to the chat and answering your questions. This is another roadside place, just a cut on the side of the road, and you can see those little nodules, that little angular chunks that the clay's broken into. That's classic, that the texture of clay that you're looking at there. So, you know, and a light colored clay at that, which is, at least in my area, quite rare. So, and then I'll show you a few little samples I brought here. So this is some of that clay that's like, you know, rock-like. It's pretty hard. I don't know if you can hear that. It's pretty hard. But the texture alone, when I'm driving past it on the road, tells me that it's clay. And of course, I've used this. This is good clay. This is some of the clay that I've showed you in on this video today. The one that had the little specks in it. Again, kind of rock-like, you know. But not all clay is rock-like. This is some of that. This is one of my favorite clays. I use this a lot. If you've ever taken one of my workshops, this is the clay we use in workshops. This is that Sonoyta Highway, and it looks like dirt, you know. But when you're out there, you can kind of see that crackled texture where it's been wet. That tells you that. This is this was I think number 4 when I did that test last year out in the Safford area. Again, it kind of looks like dirt, but a very good clay. And then finally, my last example is this is some of that smectite clay, and it breaks into little flaky layers. And when you dig it up, they're all these little flakes are just laid in there real tight. It's really cool. You know, you put your hand in it, it kind of comes apart in your hand into these little flat layers. And I wish you could kind of see. I don't know if the video is capturing it, but they're all little flakes. So different textures that you can get in clay that, you know, tell you that you're dealing with clay, that you can learn to look for. Let's see if I can get through these chats now. If I can figure out where I left off. I'm going to go pretty fast because I'm running out of time. We'll go a little over an hour today, and that's okay with me. Okay, I got the Brazil comment. Ren Pixie, well, you got to get paid. Yeah, that's the difficulty. I got to get paid, and yet, you know, I don't want to annoy you guys either. I'm just tuning in. So, is there a Damascus micarta version of reduction type stuff? I don't even know what that means, Thomas Olson. A Damascus micarta version of reduction type stuff. Sorry, you have to be more specific. I don't have no idea what you're talking about. James Cecil, I heard adding beer to clay makes it more plastic. There's a lot of, you know, they're not exactly old wise tales. There's a lot of little tricks that will improve the plasticity of clay. You know, there's one about peeing in your clay too. Hate to say it. But most of those are only going to be marginal improvements. You know, if you've got good clay, it can make it a little better. But it's not going to make a terrible clay good. So, I mean, go ahead and try those things. Adding beer, letting it age for 6 months. These things are all going to help improve the plasticity, but marginally. Keep in mind, marginally. If you've got a bad clay, they're not going to make it usable. Can blue and red organic dye withstand heat? No, chances are any kind of organic dye is going to burn out in the firing. I wouldn't fiddle with it. If you want to get a commercial dye try, what do they call it? Mason stains. That's what they use for like cement and bricks. And that stuff usually will keep its color through the firing. You can buy those online. Look on Amazon, Mason stains. Aren't all clays wild? Well, N Doghouse says aren't all clays wild. Yeah, all clays come from the wild. But, I mean, that's like saying, I mean, anything you buy in the store comes from a wild, right? I mean, I've got a Ford truck out there. It's all made from wild materials, right? Because someplace they're digging the iron that they make the chassis out of, and someplace they're pumping the oil out of the ground that they use to make the plastic on the dash cover and all that stuff. All the plastic is coming from crude oil. So, I mean, yeah, it's a wild truck. It's made from natural materials. But it's gone through quite a bit of processing before it became a truck. Whereas wild clays are ones that you go out and dig from the ground and they're minimally processed, right? It's a little different. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, everything comes from the earth originally. Everything in my office, right? I mean, you can trace this, all the components from my microphone back to... you know, stuff that was mined out of the ground. But how many steps are there between being this microphone and coming from the earth? I've always wondered if stoneware pottery can be done with primitive resources. Oh, sure. So stoneware is just all that implies is that it can withstand high temperatures. So this is a clay that you can fire to whatever cone, whatever, and it becomes very, very hard and vitrified. And lots of wild clays will do that, but you're going to have to sample a number of clays and run a lot of tests and find out where that clay can be fired to. I did a video last year where I tested my clays in an electric kiln. It's easy to do. You just make sure it's not going to melt and run down and ruin your kiln. But you know, run those tests and figure out which of those clays can withstand those temperatures and become good vitrified pottery. That's stuff the Thornburgs made. So I've got some shirts here that Paul and Laurel Thornburg gave me. All right, and if you saw my latest video where they were firing in that big earthen tunnel kiln, they were firing these up to and sometimes over 1,000 degrees Celsius, and these are very, very, very clinky. So they are at least somewhat vitrified, quite a bit more than my pottery. These are, I don't know if you'd even call these earthenware, maybe. They're very clinky. So the point is, their clays could handle pretty high temperatures, and a lot of wild clays can. Beer makes most things better. Doghouse thinks domestic clays are store-bought. They are processed for various qualities, throwing, hand building, yeah. Adrian the Crafter, I have found a huge deposit of black clay after a storm last year washed out a river, but there is almost no way of reaching it except if I somehow have a ladder. Yeah, I've done a lot of weird things to get clay, that's for sure. I mean, sometimes it'll be up a bank or like across a river or something. When I first met Wes, Airstream Wanderings Wes, he was coming to Arizona to collect clays and minerals, and I brought a step ladder out, and we went up the side of this really steep, it was a road cut, and got some hematite way at the top. So yeah, you do all kinds of things for stuff like that. You know, because if it's a good clay and it's hard to get to, then it's worth the effort, as long as it's not, you know, super dangerous. Dolly Belfour says, I just jumped in and thought he was sitting in a clay hut window. I don't know where you got that. Was it maybe from the over here? That looked like I was sitting up here. Adrian Crafter says that crackly or plastic texture is my favorite thing to see. Some of that clay, the texture is almost like so smooth. It looks like butter or peanut butter, or you know, it's hard. It's not wet, but it has like a very soft kind of a creamy looking texture about it. The way I don't have any pictures of it to show you today, but I do have pictures like that. Just amazing stuff. Sometimes you see that texture and you're like, wow, that looks so pure. And that stuff that's really pure like that, that's where you're going to need to add a lot of, temper to make it usable. This stuff, you know, you can see the grit in it. If I can get this to focus on this and not my face. Not so much. Anyways, you can see the grit in it. It has a lot of grit. And so I use a lot less temper with that than I do with like this, because this is more pure, it needs more temper. Ghosty Ocean, I'd love to build my own work hut like Primitive Technology does. He works, it's so impressive. Yeah, he has a cool thing. Check out, if you haven't, check out Chad Zuber. He has a cool little hut too. And I got to go out to his camp last year, and I filmed a video out there with him. And he's got a lot of cool stuff. And his clay quarry is right behind his hut. So his hut is here. Clay quarry is, I don't know, 25 feet away or something. And the clay is so good, you wouldn't even know it by looking at it. It just looks like crusty old dirt. That clay is so good that he jigs it out of the ground. He doesn't have to add temper. He can form pots out of it. He uses the same material to make adobe bricks for his house. He just does all kinds of amazing things. Very, very fine work with that clay. That is just unbelievable. You can fire it as hot as he wants. It never like melts. It's rock solid clay, and it's right there at his hut. So really cool. Check out his stuff if you haven't. Do any of the areas that you collect your clay require permission? That's a good question. I'm really careful about where I go. So where I live here in Arizona, there's lots of public land. And you have to be careful. I mean, there's public, I'm not digging on the reservation. I'm not digging on, the Indian reservation. I'm not digging on national park land. There's some areas, even other areas that are off limits. State parks as well, off limits. But most, and not all, most BLM and Forest Service are open to collecting minerals. So like that last video you saw, where I was on the side of the road, like looking at clays in various spots along that stretch of road, that's National Forest. That's in the Apache State Graves National Forest. And a Forest Service employee in a Forest Service truck drove past me while I was down there digging clay and didn't even stop to say hi. So they don't think anything of it. Now, what you don't want to do is go out and dig a big hole in the middle of a meadow and disrupt the natural things. You don't want to kill plants and stuff. Leave it as natural as possible. Don't leave a big hole in the ground. Pull some of that dirt down so it looks natural when you're done. That goes a long way. Stream banks are good because again you're not digging into the soil and ruining like plant life and stuff. You want to be as kind. What did they used to say? I used to work for the Forest Service years ago. Light hand on the land. That was our rule when we dug fire line, when we were putting out fires, was light hand on the land. So we didn't want to do anything really harsh or that was going to show signs of what we did years later. You wanted to be as gentle on the land as possible. And I think that's a good rule of thumb for digging clay. Go out there, dig it on Forest Service, but don't leave a mess and don't, do it in a place where it's disturbing things. Take it easy, and then nobody's going to care if we do it. And we'll be able to do it for a long time. Now, if you're in a place where there's a lot of private land, farms, ranches, get permission. Talk to the landowner. Most of those landowners, they don't care if you dig a bucket of clay, as long as, again, you're being that light hand on the land. You're not disturbing things. Like I did that in St. John's. I was in St. John's, Arizona, looking for white clay, and I talked to one of the landowners. He let me go look at a ruin that was on his property that I wanted to see. And then we started talking about clay, and he said, "Oh, go try this one spot over here. I know a good spot, and I have the property, so just go right on out there." And so that just talk to the landowners. Ranchers are, they're not always. They're like anybody else. Like there's jerks, and there's nice people, but it wouldn't hurt you to reach out to them. Most of them are going to respond kindly. They're used to people asking for permission to hunt deer on their property and stuff. They're not going to think anything of it if you come knock on their door and ask them to dig dirt. As long as you let them know that, you're not going to damage stuff, ruin their grass or whatever. Where was I? Lost my place. Sam Jarrett says, do any of the areas that you collect... Oh, I read that. Sorry. Once I saw your videos about identifying wild clay, I can't stop seeing it everywhere. Texas is known for having highly expansive soils. Yeah, once you learn what to look for, once you've been out on that clay hunt, you will see it. And once you learn the textures, you will see it everywhere. Texas is one of those places. I've never collected clay in Texas, but driving across, 1,000 times I've thought, oh, look. You see the clay on the side of the hill, the road cut. I-10 from like Fort Stockton to San Antonio goes across like the Edwards Plateau. And there's all that, that horizontal strata in there. And there's a bunch of places that I've driven by and gone, oh man, I'd love to check that out. Okay, where was I? Amanda says, I want to try. Oh, it just jumped on me. Doggone it. Why does it do that? It's really frustrating sometimes. It does this weird jump thing. Okay, that's where it was. Amanda says, I want to try to find some wild clay. I took a pottery class at a college, but I was so far away from where I lived that I had a hard time going or spending any length of time in the playing in the mud. Yeah. Wild clay is something you don't necessarily need a class for. I have online classes. There's a link down in the doobly-doo if you're interested. I have a master class, which is all video-based. You take it at your own pace. Take it from home. You don't have to travel to a class. And that'll help you identify wild clay. It'll tell you how to process it, the whole shebang. So if you want a class, but it's not the kind of thing where you have to necessarily take a class to learn. Desert Drifters, I've dug some of that yellow clay material from that same spot by the Bailey ruin, and it fires brown for me. Now, I wasn't saying it does fire red. I was suggesting that because of the color, it probably fires red. If it fires brown for you, it probably fires brown. I haven't tested any of that clay on that hill. I was just showing you and kind of suggesting what it might fire. That's the thing about wild clay colors, is you never know what you're going to get until you fire it. Sometimes it surprises you. Do you have any creeks local to you? That's where I get my clay. Yeah, creeks are good. Most clays in my area are crumbly and crackly. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You've got to try them to see if they're any good still. Is there any way to get clay from sandstone? No. Sandstone is made out of sand, but in between layers of sandstone, you can find layers of shale. Shale is compressed clay, and that, some of it, if it's not too compressed, some of it is so compressed that it'll never turn back into clay. And others, you can soak it in a bucket and it can rehydrate or grind it up. So sandstone is often associated with, it is often adjacent to clays, but you can't turn sandstone into clay. I live in Arkansas. I must be clay heaven. I heard there's a lot of clay in Arkansas, but I haven't collected any. What happens when you mix two colors of clay? Will the colors mix after firing? So if you're mixing two, some people do what, I can't think of what they call it, kind of like a marbled clay, where they mix two colors, but they don't mix them thoroughly, so you can get the different colors kind of interplaying. You'll see that a lot in Mata Ortiz pottery. But if you do that, you have to make sure that both clays have the same shrinkage rate. Otherwise, they're likely to crack right where those two colors come together. If you mix them thoroughly, though, if you just knead it through until it's all one color, sure, that's a great way to make a color. So right now, I'm getting ready to make an orangeware pot. I looked a long time at that picture of the ancient pot I'm trying to reproduce, at that shade of orange, and comparing that to clays that I have. And I've decided I'm going to mix two clays. So I'm going to do it dry. When they're dry and grind up, I'm going to mix them together in the pile of ground up dry clay, and then I'm going to knead it together, and it'll be one color. But hopefully it'll be that lighter shade of orange that I want, because I'm mixing kind of a light, like a gray clay with a kind of orangey brown clay. Let's see, where am I at? Concerned Pueblo Navajo person. Hello, everyone from Laguna Pueblo. Traditional potter here. This is very good info for all of you beginners learning this ancient art. Good job, Andy. I do all this myself also. Sounds good. Love to go clay hunting with you sometime. Hey, thank you. Thanks to you, I have found very good clay, red clay, very plastic and smooth, collected by wet processing, but it was worth it. Before that, I have found only black clay that was very unplastic. Well, I'm glad you found a good clay. Levigation, got to study that. Yeah, I've got a video on levigation. It's just letting gravity kind of sort those particles of clay. It's what happens in nature. That's why you find, clays on the bottom of mud puddles or old lake beds, sea beds, because nature is sorting those particles. It's letting the clay settle out here, the others there. So it's doing that in a bucket, basically. I use iron oxide mason stains from Lowe's. Well, there you go. Yeah, that'll work. It's not natural, but it certainly will work. I lost my place again. Puck Kingery says, my question revolves around experimenting with pressing leaves into slip and polishing it. Do you have any suggestions on getting crisper edges? Nope. I have zero experience with that, but it sounds like an interesting project. Hi, community question. Eastern European total beginner here. Tried to do my own clay levigation, etc. If it crackled while being, did I add too much or too little temper? If it crackled while being, I hope you mean drying. Your clay cracked when it was drying. That means not enough temper. If you haven't made a pot with it yet, try that. Is the bentonite in my BLM backyard better as slip or clay? No, you can't make pottery out of bentonite. Too much shrinkage rate. So you can try it as a slip, but it's not going to work as a building clay. Cracked while drying would be too much temper. No, cracked while drying, no, Ghosty Ocean, you've got it wrong. Cracked while drying is too little temper. Poor workability would be too much temper. Too little temper. Yeah, you got it. I'm sorry, I misread what you said. You're right. Cracked while drying is too little temper. Poor workability is too much temper. You're absolutely correct. You'd make driving I-10 across Texas sound exciting. Yeah, no, that's one of the worst drives in the country, I guarantee you. But it can be interesting looking at the clays, but I mean, that only holds your attention for so long. My suggestion for I-10 across Texas is a good audio book. My clay is a mix of shale and mudstones. Yeah, we got a lot of shales and mudstone clays around here. And how do you prevent my pottery crack at its base? My pottery crack at its base. I don't know. Your pottery is cracking at the base. Here, I'll show you another pot I'm working on. This is another one of those ones I made in the Ancient Potters Club. And instead of painting it Tonto, I painted it Gila. So with Tonto, you've got the red making part of the design inside. With Gila, you've got red on the bottom, red on the top, and then a big white area here for the design. I probably could have run that white a little farther down. That's pretty high, but that's all right. Anyway, these are both the two pots that I'm drying out right now, getting ready to, I'll hopefully start painting next week. And that'll be organic paint. So that's a whole nother thing. I don't know about pot cracking at the base, Fionn McCarthy. I don't know what that means. Granny Goose, I have no access to any red clays. I guess maybe I'm cheating because I ordered powdered red ochre from France. Yeah, that's a good way to do it if you don't have red clay. My friend up in Montana who makes pottery, he says every clay he's tried from Montana all fires brown, everything. So you got to go. Sometimes you're just in an area where the geology, everything's one color. You've got to either travel or order it, which is kind of the same, right? The ancient potters did the same thing. They didn't have Amazon, but they certainly got materials, minerals, slips from the trader who brought them from far distant places. So the concept is the same. I'm in Southwest Florida, mostly black sand, but a few inches down is red and white clay. What's the sandstone? I don't know what you mean. What's the sandstone? Sandstone is sand that's compressed into a rock. Dances with aardvarks. I know levigation is also used to grade pigments. So do you know if any pigment can be used as a highly colored clay? No, usually the pigments that you can I refine my pigments through levigation. So I'll grind up like hematite, grind it up real good, levigate it so that I've got only the finest particles, but it's still not going to be clay. If you want it to stick to the pottery and harden in the firing, you have to add at least a third clay to it. To make it have that magical property of turning hard in a firing. But sometimes if the pigment is good pigment, you can add 30% clay and it's still going to stay whatever color it was. Dave, I love driving on I-10 across the Edwards Plateau. Did you have to have an unnatural love of limestone for that to work? It is pretty. There's some great rocks out there. If there was public land, it'd be a great place to explore, but Texas has, a real shortage of public land. It's all private land. You'd have to ask landowners and stuff, but it looks like the kind of place where I'd enjoy hiking. Do you levigate your yellow to get it to fire red, orange? No, the places where I get yellow, well, I do. I levigate my slips and my pigments are all levigated, but that doesn't make it yellow is what I'm saying, Desert Drifter. So, when I get a pigment, whether it's a clay or a mineral, I'll purify it by levigation, whether grind it first or whatever. And that makes it real fine because when I'm applying it to the outside of a pot, I don't want any chunks. I want it to be super fine so I can polish it and it's not, it's not going to be gritty. But that's not what makes it yellow. So you're going to have to find some of that bright yellow material. So Desert Drifters, are you in the White Mountains? Are you in Central Arizona up there on the Mogollon Rim country? Because there's a place called Bear Springs. It's you've been to that Bailey Ruin Road. It's like the next road west, like you're going towards Heber on the highway, and then you turn in, and you'll see, if you look on a map, there's a place called Bear Springs down there. And look at Google Earth. If you look at Google Earth, the satellite view, you can see some of that like yellow and like white and stuff. There's like areas out there that's kind of badlandish. Hike out there. They're not next to the road. There's a little bit, quarter-mile walk or something, not far. And there's some really good, really like yellow stones that are the color of like a school bus, like really, really yellow, mustard yellow. And those are great pigment stones. They fire really red. And that crops up all around the White Mountains. There's some of that south of Pinedale. There's some of it, down in the Bailey Ruin area. It's all around that area. There's that yellow material. And what you want is the yellowest yellow you can find. And that stuff's going to fire super red. And it's around. If you've got access to that area, you'll find it. You just got to look. Have you tried making bowls by forming on a round stone? No, but I've formed bowls on a round, like a hump mold or the bottom of a pot, like Tony Soares does, right? Turn a pot upside down. You can form a bowl right on the bottom of it real easy. I've never used a stone because stones aren't very round usually. They're lumpy. Will the watercolor burn off during firing if I use it? Watercolor? Yeah, watercolors are generally not going to stay. Depends on what they're made of, I guess. Forming a round stone. Artist Irma Felicia Rodriguez Carey. I have found 2 different kinds of clay in Ohio so far. Still exploring. If anyone knows about the Ohio area, let me know. Tribalism blinds them, but not you, right? I live on a clay pad. We dug deep enough for it to start acting like rock. I was told that around here, that is the bedrock. Yeah, building on clay is difficult because it expands. Oh, Desert Drifters, you're in Snowflake. Yeah. That yellow is around there. You just got to explore. And like I said, drive I don't remember the number of the highway, the one that runs from Show Low to Heber, right? And there's all those Forest Service roads going south to the rim. Go down those roads. That yellow's down there. You're real close. You're right in the area. And that's what Desert Drifters, that's what all that White Mountain redware was made with. Pinedale black on red, Pinedale polychrome, Cedar Creek polychrome, 4 Mile polychrome. Those are all painted with that yellow material that's down there. And we know that because Emil Howery found unfired White Mountain redware pots in, I don't know if it's Show Low or Pinedale Ruin, one of those. He found unfired pots that were slipped with that yellow material. He found lots of that yellow material in those ruins. They were using that yellow. And so it's down there. Sulfur. Yellow means sulfur. No. It's not sulfur. There's different kinds of yellow. Yellow can also mean uranium, which you don't want. The yellow I'm talking about is iron hydroxide. So iron oxide is red. Iron hydroxide is limonite or yellow material. That's the stuff. It's just iron that I believe, from what I understand, it's settled out in water, so it has a different composition, something like that. Anyways, yeah, it's yellow and it fires red because it's iron. Someone mentioned sandstone, which I always thought was being yellow. Yeah, you're not going to use sandstone for clay. I'm just saying the clay is adjacent to the sandstone. Petra says, I never really found recently deposited secondary clays, which were plastic to make. Oh, dang it. It's doing something weird. A Potter happy. Only primary clays are ancient geological secondary deposited ones. Yeah, it's not. Some of that recently deposited stuff is really good. It just depends. I had a friend who collected it from the Little Colorado riverbed, like after the monsoons, and said it was the best stuff ever, and he wanted to go back and get some. But the trouble with collecting from a riverbed like that is it may be good this year, it may be different next year, because it's collecting stuff from way, miles upstream. And so depending on where the rains are coming from, how much rain you get in different areas, you're going to get a different mix of minerals all the time. What do you think is the best to paint a pot with? Thank you from New Mexico. The best to paint pots with? I don't know. Depends on what you're trying to do. You're trying to make redware or whiteware? There's a million clays out there that are good to paint pots with. Or are you just looking for a paint, like a mineral paint? Like a manganese mineral paint is good for black designs and oxidation. That would be a good place to start. Ren Pixie, I'm headed to Albuquerque on a road time. Any suggested areas to clay hunt? No, I don't know any out towards Albuquerque, but I mean, I know there are. You're going to Albuquerque. Yeah, like I-40 or something. You should go over there on, it's a back road, Ren Pixie. It runs from Fence Lake, New Mexico. Look it up. It's a out of the way place. Runs from Fence Lake, like north-south, up towards like Gallup. And that road south of Fence Lake, it's only a few miles south of Fence Lake. It's a dirt road, but it's a good graded, like a county road. There's a hill, it's called Molino Hill. Marino, maybe Marino. And it's a hill that the road goes up. It's a good road. There's clay all through there, and yellow clay at that. So that's a neat place to look. It's not on the main road to Albuquerque, but it wouldn't be too far out of your way. How do you feel about mixing different kinds of clay together? Yeah, I've already talked about that, Diana. I mix clays together all the time based on, like, I'm trying to get a certain consistency. Like, one clay might be a little strong, like really has a lot of wet strength. Another clay might have a lot of plasticity, but it has no wet strength. I can mix those two together and get real good building qualities with clay. That's a great way to do it. Or with this next project I'm working on, trying to get a certain color, right? Like, I looked at all my clays and none of them was making the color I was seeing on this ancient pot I'm trying to recreate. And so I'm going to try mixing two clays together, kind of a reddish brown with kind of a light, almost like creamy colored clay, mixing those together to get kind of more of an oranger color. So yeah, mixing clays is great. All right, we're going to wrap it up and call it good, everybody. I appreciate all your time and your questions and showing up today, and we will catch you next time.